Before I jump into this review, I would like to give a disclaimer that this game was rated M by ESRB, so younger audiences, beware of any disturbing imagery you may see. Oh, this game. Oh! I'm about to commit a taboo of critics by saying my verdict on a game first, but Bloodborne is one of the greatest games ever made, and I will fight anyone to the death who disagrees. In order to understand my viewpoint, we need to tackle the game from all angles. H.P. Lovecraft is arguably the greatest writer of the horror genre. Dagon is probably my favorite short story, and I haven't even read some of his most popular works. Now, I do not agree with him as a person, as he was a racist. I do not condone any form of racism on this channel, especially naming your dog. However, that man could write. So, when you're making any form of media that is based on his works, it is pretty much always going to be a cheap, soulless cash grab attempting to exploit your nostalgia. Bloodborne, on a story level, is anything but one of those. The game tells a dark and grisly story, but once you look into item descriptions and start questioning bosses, NPCs, and the placement of enemies, that is when your brain starts to explode. I only wish I could go in full depth the story, but I want to spoil as little as possible. Yharnam has been overrun with a plague that turns people into beasts. 2 sections of a sacred church have been set up to take care of the scourge: the Black Church Hunters and the White Church Hunters. The Black Church Hunters are actually taking care of the plague by killing the beasts, but the White Church Hunters make them out to be the villains. But the White Church Hunters are actually the villains, because instead of helping, they're just experimenting on the beast. And then you have the Choir, which is a section of the White Church Hunters that performs experiments on the remaining humans. And then you discover that H.P. Lovecraft's old ones are actually running the show. One is the Amygdala, an obvious Cthulhu creature, which can transport you to nightmare realms. And then you realize that the Amygdala is a part of your brain that processes fear. And then you remember you encounter one using an item called the Tonsil Stone. What is tonsil in Spanish again?
Amígdala.
I also love the storytelling in this game. It uses dialogue from NPCs slowly going insane, partially transformed beasts still going about their work on the hunt, bits of information from fellow hunters. This game is nothing but grim and dark. If you are looking for sunshine and rainbows, you are going to give this game a very scathing review. Every swing of your weapon, every shot of your gun, every attack you just narrowly dodge, every second of the combat is addictive intensity. I love the sidestep dodge. It allows me to get back to attacking extremely fast as well as close gaps. Bloodborne uses an interesting style with its weapons. You have a transforming weapon in your right hand and a gun in your left. Guns don't normally do that much damage, but if you invest in a stat called Blood Tinge, it will become the filthiest weapon you can use against another player. And if timed right during an opponent's attack, it can parry, opening up your opponent for a visceral attack. Your weapon is capable of transforming when you press the left bumper. Some of these transformations are lazy. It's not just a spear now, it's a long spear with a gun. But most of them are actually very cool. My favorite weapon is a mace that turns into a chainsaw. Whereas in Dark Souls, you would level your character around a class or attribute of weapons, in Bloodborne, you only really level your character around 1 or 2 weapons. This is largely because there are only 20-some weapons in the entire game, including the DLC, but each weapon is wildly unique from the last. This is why I love the weapons in Bloodborne much more than in Dark Souls. If you have 215 weapons, but it's the same 5 weapons 43 times each, that doesn't mean your game has more variety. Here's that same weapon, but now it has a curved hilt. Wow, how'd we do that? I can guarantee that all the transform modes of the weapons are completely different from each other. There are some weapons that reuse the moveset from the untransformed mode from other weapons, such as the Saw Cleaver, Saw Spear, Ludwig's Holy Blade, and Kirkhammer. But I am willing to overlook this for all of the variety in the other weapons. And because there are so few weapons, that means each is balanced in its own way. In Dark Souls, there was technically something for all players, but very few options were actually viable. In Bloodborne, there are very few weapons that aren't viable. Every enemy is a horrific masterpiece of 3D design. The enemy designs are all unique and very cool. The aggressive movesets are also one of the leading reasons that the combat is so addictive. The art style is also very deep. Some enemies are full beasts, while others are humans who are only partially transformed. Some are humans who have just gone insane. I will admit, some enemies are annoying. The dogs that attack way too fast, hunters who only use their guns, brain suckers which only use their stupid grab attack. But all in all, I thought From Software did a great job with the enemy design. While this game provides one of the greatest solo experiences, the co-op is quite fun, but the matchmaking is quite bad. In some areas, I find it more efficient to just run through by yourself because you'll probably spend more time waiting than playing through them with a co-op buddy. This game's PvP has been appraised, and I really don't see why. It's just gun spam. Your connection determines the winner. Invasions are also among the stupidest form of PvP I have ever bear witness to. In a game that punishes a death and requires the use of a finite item to co-op, a mandatory opponent when co-oping throws a huge wrench in the progression. I think I liked Bloodborne's form of invasions the best though. If you kill a certain enemy while co-oping, it prevents you from getting invaded. Genius. As a mechanic, blood gems are really cool. You can find them and put them on your weapons to make them deal more damage. Sometimes the damage difference with and without them is up to 300 damage or more. However, I do not agree with some of these drop rates. Some gems on specific builds have a drop rate of less than 1%. Chalice dungeons are the justification for the farming of these gems. Chalice dungeons are procedurally generated areas with bosses, usually used to collect materials and farm. I think that is a great idea. It creates areas specifically for farming rather than just farming the base game. But do not be fooled into thinking that they add more content to the game. A lot of the layouts are very similar to each other, but I still like them. You can just create one to play through with your friends when you are done with the game, which is pretty fun because you don't always know what to expect for certain. This is the best part of the game. Every boss is a visual masterpiece with clever movesets, haunting lore, and award-winning music accompaniment. I don't think there are any bosses that I actually dislike. This section of my review is the shortest, but it is because it is the most straightforward part of the game. For my final point, I would like to touch on a common topic brought up with these games: difficulty. The critic industry has this weird assumption that ease of play and quality of a game are physically intertwined. That is nowhere near true. Artificial difficulty and rough spikes in difficulty affect quality, but not difficulty as a whole. I personally only really noticed the difficulty during the bosses and a few of the big gauntlets or enemies. And if anything, the difficulty is what makes the combat so addictive. There are some cases where it feels artificial, such as a ton of enemies really close together and grab attacks that come out instantly in one shot, but I still feel that the difficulty was a needed touch and the game wouldn't be the same without it. Bloodborne is not without flaws, but it comes closer to a masterpiece than any game I've seen. I have seen many unfair arguments regarding this game, but it is impossible to refute its quality. This game is absolutely still worth playing, even this long after its release. Even if this was the only game on PS4, I would still buy one.